existence of the human soul. How does that figure into this?
There are humans here who are designers of the new unconscious mind that will bridge human populations everywhere on the planet to feel and express equality and oneness. It will connect humanity and the I am, we are, consciousness, instead of the separation consciousness. It will not be based on hierarchy. The deception is coming down. One of the things that was never disclosed in the materials, including my previous 4 interviews, is that certain information was to be withheld. Some information was even veiled to not raise the ire of the triad of power. This information, this interview, will not be disclosed in the same timeline as the previous 4.
Why?
The designers of the new unconscious layer of the human 3.0 are on the planet now. They are doing some of the preparation required to move humanity, who will be sitting at the fork in the road, in the next 40-50 years, to choose the I am, we are, path.
So I can't release this interview?
No. When it's time, I will contact you.
You said some of the information was veiled. In what way?
The wingmakers will only release some of the information now, in 1998. That is the information that will not feel too revolutionary, too radical. It needed, in their own words, to cross into the human interface and activate a willingness to listen to their voice. For example, they used the term wingmakers to describe themselves, knowing it would have a connection to the angel construct.
But you said the wingmakers were a future representation of human beings, presumably, from this disclosure, version 3.0. Right?
Yes, but there is programming within the human interface, where the functional implants are networked as a system that will tune out certain information. A person will hear it, but they will not act on it. They will hear it, but they will object to it. They will hear it, but they will not share it. All of these programs were created, not originally, but they can be upgraded. The program can be updated with new instructions. It makes cracking into this reality, exposing it for what it truly is, a very difficult proposition. This is why it requires a degree of stealth. The deception is so thick and opaque in this reality that the ones who are trying to come into the prison and create a crack in the wall, they also have to use a form of deception.
Why?
The programming, Sarah. If the pure state information was given out, and it contradicted everything that people have been told to believe, if it was the literal reverse of what was logical and acceptable in this world, who would listen? The wingmakers needed to awaken certain people to bring them inside their information field, to warm them up to the truth. It has to be done in degrees for the vast majority of people.
What about me?
You are not among the vast majority, but then you're only getting a taste of it.
Does everyone within the labyrinth group know this, too?
Yes, to varying degrees.
But they were going down the transhumanism path. Did this information change their mind?
No. That's really why I'm here.
You just said I'm only getting a taste of it, so there's still more materials that will be released later?
Yes.
But you're not going to tell me when, right?
Correct.
As intelligent and aware as the labyrinth group is, why didn't this information change their minds?
I had the benefit of having direct interactions with the wingmakers. None of my peers did. This was the difference in my willingness to act on the information, and not simply consider it as a contradiction to my invested reality.
This is fucked up, isn't it?
What part?
All of it. It's all fucked up and we did it.
Whatever it is, it's important to know what's behind the deception, to look with sober eyes on the truth. It may not be a beautiful picture to be sure, but how else do you realize your own truth, until you know the truth of the big picture? So, however screwed up it seems, it is an inception point for the individual to redefine themselves. Would you rather stay in the illusion of a soul, in a human body, that will be saved by God, ascend into heaven and hang out with angels who strum harps? That whole idea is repulsive once you know this. That picture is based on separation, selfishness, lack of empathy and understanding. Or, you can simply say it's all a big illusion, including the notion that we are infinite beings, and that when you die, you're done. The part of this new picture that is promising is that we exist infinitely, despite the fact that we have been suppressed and enslaved. We also can play a role in supporting this redefinition of the human being, through our thoughts and behaviors. And maybe most importantly, we have the wingmakers, our future selves, providing us with evidence that I am, we are, prevailed. When I first read these materials, these were the things that provided some sense of hope, and I share them with you, for what it's worth.
Thanks. All of the things that you told me in the first 4 interviews, with this new information, does it change it?
Yes. Everything is affected by this.
Give me an example.
Sunday night I mentioned LERM, or the Light Encoded Reality Matrix. LERM is what the Labyrinth group thought was God, in terms of proof. But what was really discovered was the essence of Anu, and how he operates in this reality as an all-encompassing observation field that is inside our consciousness interface to this reality existence called Earth. LERM is Anu projected.
What about ETs? Don't they know about this, and can't they intervene and save us from this situation?
Remember, everyone inside our universe is part of this deception, whether they know it or not. There are 4 classes of beings. 1. Those who know the deception and are actively supporting it. 2. Those who know about the deception but are unwilling to do anything about it. 3. Those who don't know the deception and are unknowingly supporting it. And 4. Those who know about the deception and are actively trying to step out of the deception and engineer a process for everyone else to do the same. That's it. It doesn't matter if the being is physical or non-physical. Everyone falls into one of these 4 categories everywhere in our universe of existence. The beings in Group 3 are waking up. Some of them understand that the deception in one part of the universe infects all. It requires corrective action. It requires collective understanding to ensure that it will never happen again.
How can everyone in this universe be a part of this deception? I don't understand.
Our entire universe is created. I'm not saying it is the universe. I'm saying that what we call the universe, as far as we can observe, is part of the hologram implanted within our consciousness framework and human interface. Our mind consciousness established the spatial-temporal relationships of everything we see, and as I said, this is part of our program. And this includes the universe. Why do you think that our best minds on the planet cannot define consciousness, let alone the subconscious and unconscious mind? It is programmed this way. Anu did not want us to figure it out. We'll look at neural information and decide it can be sliced 1,000 different ways, but it still doesn't explain how it's experienced. As Aristotle said some 2,300 years ago, to be conscious that we are perceiving is to So, are we an isolated life form that confronts our external, separate reality? No, we are connected to all. That is why I am, we are, is the critical inception point for our identity. Any being that does not confirm their belief in this, is not aware of reality. It doesn't matter where they exist or what vessel they wear. It doesn't matter if they want to save humanity. They must first act from this inception. The universe, as immense as it appears, is a hologram inside a programmed existence which every human being agrees is reality. That agreement informs the unconscious mind, again, a part of the human interface that Anu created, and collectively we all see our world the same way, more or less. We have been told there are trillions of planets with life. That the universe is abundant with life forms in various dimensions, but what we notice here, on Earth, the tangible, visible Earth, are there other beings? Of course. I've seen them. Will they save humanity? They can't. They can only support. It isn't about anyone or anything saving us. It is about a redefinition process that can only occur within each individual entity. It isn't about being beamed up or ascending to some higher, protected dimension. This will be done in the physical body as human beings, by human beings, for human beings.
Why you? Why do you suppose you can interact with the wingmakers and were asked to release this information? Why didn't they interact with 15, too?
First of all, it isn't just me. However, within the Labyrinth group, they selected me for reasons that I had a certain resonance to their information that others within the Labyrinth group lacked. In terms of releasing the information, perhaps I was the only one who would go to the extreme of defecting from the ACIO to make this information available. I don't look at myself as unique, in the sense that I am the only one involved in getting this information out. There are others, many others, both physical and non-physical, who are assisting in this transformative process. The wingmakers refer to it in their philosophy papers as the 2 portals.
I've only heard you speak of the Grand Portal. I assume it's one of the 2 portals.
Yes. The Grand Portal will be released in the wingmakers' literature as the irrefutable scientific discovery of the human soul, and in a way, that's true, but it's not the whole story. The 2 portals are defined as the crack, and the wall demolition.
I hope you plan to explain that.
Yes, well, the crack is the first portal. It is the portal between worlds. It is a human, and that's about all I know at this time.
A human who does what?
That can step between worlds. I realize that thousands of people, even famous people, have claimed to have visited heaven, but according to the writings of the wingmakers, it is not true. They have wandered into the astral world, which has many dimensions, but this astral world is part of the creation of Anu, in terms of our programming. Our true dimensional existence is not of Anu's creation or formulas. The human portal will be a communication portal between our origins, as a race of infinite beings, and this world, the hologram of deception.
What about the wall demolition, as you called it?
The grand portal is the wall demolition. That's when the wall comes down, through the efforts of all beings that are undergoing the sovereign integral process. And this makes it possible for all human beings to step forward, into their infinite self or life essence.
So the sequence is first the human portal and then the grand portal? And from a timing perspective, what can you say about it?
The human portal anchors the inception point on Earth for the grand portal. It will come in about 10 years. The grand portal, about 70 years after that. Those are the rough time frames I've been given, but always with a stipulation that these times can shift and change.
What does science say about this?
Science in terms of what?
I mean the whole notion of the universe being a hologram or illusion created inside our head.
Science is not able to explain it. The counter-logical nature of the universe, in terms of quantum behavior, is impossible to explain. Some scientists have relented to explaining it all away as hidden variables. But frankly, what the wingmakers have explained, is that we're creating the universe through the human interface Anu provided us, by reinterpreting sound vibrations through our 5 senses.
But it doesn't make sense. How can I see the moon, and a 2-year-old can see it exactly the same way? How can it be the same?
No. This is what the unconscious mind provides the human 2.0 interface. It gathers the interpretation of the sound vibration of the moon, based on billions and billions of sightings throughout time. These evolve and change based on environmental conditions, but generally the notion that the moon is silver, and generally the size that it is stored and shared in the DNA and unconscious mind system, and reinforced by culture, family and education. This is the universal collective field. It's a field effect that transfers information through vibratory fields that interconnect humans.
Maybe it'll just take me a while to get that one. I hear your explanation. It just doesn't make sense to me. Let me change the topic slightly. If everyone's life is pre-programmed, why are you and I talking about this? I mean, why are we able to discuss this? Why would Marduk's program allow us to even glimpse this information?
It's a good question. Maybe the best way to understand this is to consider a thought experiment. Imagine that our universe is a bubble. It was created by a group of entities that used deception against their equals, who had never experienced such an evil vision of separation, and therefore couldn't conceive of a defense against it. This bubble universe seemed complete and always expanding. In many ways, it was an ideal platform for life, and yet only one sentient life form seemed to exist, on one tiny planet inside this vast, near infinite universe. Inside this same bubble, there were vibratory dimensions that became known in religious circles as heaven and hell, and in spiritual and psychic circles, as the etheric and astral planes. These planes exist inside the bubble, but are not visible with the human interface or 5 senses. We'll call this Bubble 1. External to Bubble 1, imagine there is another universe or dimension of existence. It is vast and encompasses Bubble 1 wholly. Within the second, larger bubble is the dimension from which our life essence originated prior to its insertion into Bubble 1. Now, beings in Bubble 2 can enter Bubble 1 and experience it fully. However, if they get too close to the populated planet called Earth and stay too long, they will manifest and not be able to return to Bubble 2. Earth is the focal point in Bubble 1. The entities, who fancy themselves as gods, create more bubbles. They entrap other races in the same paradigm of deception and cast beings from Bubble 2 to new bubbles that are similar to Bubble 1. These entities essentially plan to take over Bubble 2 for themselves, while making their equals, who formerly shared Bubble 2, enslaved worshippers who look to the rulers of Bubble 2 as their gods. Meanwhile, there is a larger bubble that surrounds Bubble 2. We'll call it Bubble 3. Are you with me?
I think so.
Good. so Bubble 3 encompasses Bubble 2 and all of the smaller bubbles related to Bubble 1. There are beings in Bubble 3 that are aware of the deception perpetrated on the bubbles and the beings within them, but infinite beings are patient and curious. They wanted to see what this separation construct would create. In dimensions that had only known oneness and equality, the concept of division in material form was interesting.
But all the human misery, just to run an experiment?
Remember, the human machine is not real. It's the equivalent of a spacesuit with artificial intelligence and a sense and response sensory system. The astronaut, us, is infinite. It cannot be killed, or hurt, or destroyed. While the experimentation looks miserable from a human perspective, it is vibrant with learning on many other levels, one of which is to build the awareness in all beings of never allowing this deception to occur again. The unconscious mind system of the human being exists in a similar, but significantly more advanced modus operandi, in the interdimensional beings that can interoperate between the three bubbles. It is what allows the equality and oneness to be maintained in vast worlds of space-time and quantum space-time. Now, within this thought experiment, you can see that the dimensions of space-time are more dimensional than one universe. That entities exist in these various bubbles, experimenting with their creation. Sometimes in this experimentation, they decide to enslave through the constructs of separation and deception. This occurs with issues that human beings can relate to, like scarcity, preservation of a race, unintended consequences of decisions, service to self instead of service to truth. All of these elements were in the behavioral equations of Anu and his Syrian accomplices. At some point, the lessons are learned. The entire experiment solidifies and hardens to such a degree that it cannot really compress anymore. Its value rapidly diminishes from that point. When this happens, beings will intervene. In our case, we intervened in the form of humanity returning to warn of this reality, hence the Wingmakers' intervention. As for why we are talking, it's simple. Marduk is not the only one who can program.
And what does that mean?
In today's world we have programmers who can write code that take the user of that code from one experience to the next. It moves them from point A to point B. Programming is an aspect of time. It's a directional process. You're aware of hackers. They come in all sizes. Earlier this year a 15-year-old kid hacked into the US Air Force. Even Microsoft is finding it impossible to protect its NT operating system. The hacker mindset is again a manifestation of separation. It is a polarity. A mind game of sorts, complete with ego and sometimes greed. Mostly, it's a reminder that whatever's a fortress remains vulnerable. The program that Marduk created is similar in concept to our software programming, but infinitely more complex and advanced. However, as any hacker will tell you, anything can be hacked, with the right technology and skill. Our programs have been hacked. We've been altered. We're not connected in the same way to the grid lines that rule this hologram that I called Bubble 1, a little earlier.
Who? Who did the hacking?
I could give you a name. I don't know. I've been told that there are many resources that are being used to create the crack in the wall, and then, from the inside, that's us, humanity, we'll push the wall down collectively and walk out of this prison. We are part of the crack.
I don't remember volunteering.
For what it's worth, neither do I.
Okay. I'm going to shift the conversation a bit. In my notes on Saturday you said the following, that the Wingmakers claim that the three-dimensional five-sensory domain that humans have adjusted to, is the reason we are only using a fractional portion of our intelligence. They claim that the time capsule would be the bridge from the three-dimensional five-sensory domain, to the multidimensional seven-sensory domain. How does that relate to tonight's conversation, and what exactly is the time capsule?
The time capsule is the content of the Wingmakers project. It's called the time capsule because it's a designed intervention to shift time. It's called the capsule because it is a delivery system of information that is designed to assist people to unlock from their grid lines, their pre-programmed life path, where they were essentially a human robot marching through their life path as they were programmed to do. Until the Wingmakers disclose this aspect of their intervention, they can't disclose the real meaning behind their words. Again, they cloak their words in the accepted standards of this world's rules relative to the New Age, New World Order, spirituality, religion, philosophy, etc. This gave them an accepted anonymity. After all, it was all presented as a myth. There's nothing in a myth that could cause Anu to censor or strike back. They tested the explicitness of the language, and decided to place some of the activational elements in other formats like art, poetry and music. In other words, when they couldn't state something explicitly, because of retaliatory concerns, they would encode it into the art.
But you've asked me to hold it back, this interview. What if it never gets released?
Then it wasn't necessary.
But then that would make the rest of the materials less than true, wouldn't it?
I would say it would make them less direct or explicit, but to your point, yes, I would agree that the truth is diminished without the framework of this disclosure.
Who are these materials for? I mean, I can tell you right now that when you were describing the first 4 interviews, I could count on one hand how many people I know who would listen to this perspective with an open mind. Most of my friends and family, I wouldn't even mention it. But with this interview, I don't think anyone I know would be open to it. I can't think of one, to be honest.
I understand. The number of people who show up to look through the crack in the wall will be very small. In terms of the whole population, a tiny fraction. But the real definition of the grand portal is that enough people will look through that crack and recognize there is more, much more to reality's existence, and they will work collectively to push down the wall. When the wall falls, that will be when the infinite beings inside step out and operate the human instrument, not as a separate thing, not as a vessel or something they wear as a uniform, but they will operate inside the human body, free of the interface and functional implants.
You mean they won't ascend into bubble number 2 or 3?
They will stay right here, Earth. But they will stay here, in the body, as infinite beings, not enslaved shells of themselves.
You said there were other beings involved in this intervention. Can you disclose them?
I'd prefer not to say anything other than to mention that it will be disclosed soon. This whole enslavement of humanity is like the 6 blind men touching the elephant. Many people are feeling parts of the elephant and describing the part they are touching, but with blindfolds on, it is very hard to describe the whole deception.
Are these blind men humans?
Yes, of course. They see parts of this enslavement and they know something is happening. Something isn't right. You can have godlike beings walking around the earth coincident with murder, rape, child abuse and war, and they don't feel the separation and deception. Something is terribly wrong. Why are we letting this happen? According to the wingmakers, there are people who are incarnated now who would be the equivalent of outliers. Are you familiar with this term?
No.
The term is typically used in statistics. Think of it like an anomaly. A person has what is called a transient malfunction to their interface, but in this malfunction, they are able to see through the crack. It might only last a second or 2, but they glimpse what is behind the walls. And again, I'm not talking about the astral plane, that's just a more rarefied plane of the hologram of deception. People with these transient malfunctions often end up being diagnosed autistic, or in extreme cases, are considered schizophrenic, but because the malfunction is transient, they slowly merge back into the human hologram and lack the contextual meaning of what they saw anyway. They learn to forget. The program draws them back in. But before they forget, before they return to normal beliefs, before they are drugged or quarantined, they share their experience to the unconscious mind. And this begins to express itself through culture. It'll come out in movies, books, theater, art, poetry, and many of these expressions will help to feed the unconscious mind and open it up to the possibility that the scale of our prison encompasses even the light, even science, even angels, even God.
Do we wear a target on ourselves when this gets released? I mean, will Anu decide to take us down if this goes out?
Believe me, I've probed on that issue. There's risk involved. How much? I don't know. The wingmakers explain that the creators of this plan have resigned themselves to the intervention, but that their equivalents here on Earth are not as excited by those prospects. It'll work its way out, but it'll take some time.
What happens between now and the grand portal, when the wall gets pushed down?
All I can tell you is that the triad of power will continue to consolidate. The money system will continue to spiral away from the many into the hands of the few. This was part of the original programming.
Relating to the return of Anu?
Yes. Anu would step in and solve the world's problems and be anointed. Anu would use the centralization of the money system to integrate technology into biologic systems, so they would be able to have infinite existence in Bubble 1, Earth. That way, Anu reasoned, he could be God in this world forever. But as I said, this plan was not perfect in the sense of its infinitude. Anu underestimated the beings in Bubble 3 and beyond.
Has it ever been tried before?
What?
This crack in the wall, and then pushing the wall down?
No. Not in our world. This is the first coordinated effort to liberate humanity.
But what about Jesus or Buddha?
According to the wingmakers, each of the avatars who came to this planet did so as invited guests. An avatar is an incarnate teacher of truth. Humans were explained as lost beings. It's literally how we are defined in the planes of existence outside our planet. Remember what I had said about the higher dimensional beings that would visit Earth and become manifested?
Yes.
That was how many of these avatars came to Earth. They did not go through the birth process, they literally manifested in the Earth plane with their dimensional consciousness intact. They did not want to be born into this world and inhabit a human body, because they knew they would sleep and forget. Avatars had to directly manifest. The problem was that people were afraid of them and stayed away, or people acted as guardians of the old system and wanted to destroy the avatar, or some people looked to the avatar to save them. This was what's on the evolution saviorship model of the universe. Evolution, as defined here, is the process of being saved and absolved of one's sins. The sinner evolved into the disciple, and the disciple evolved into the teacher, and the teacher evolved into the hierarchy of teachers and leaders. Saviorship simply meant that an outside force or avatar would save the individual from their sins or reprehensible behavior, and connect them to the light or spirit of God. The Savior was an intermediary of the hierarchy that plugged the individual into the light of illumination and enlightenment.
So, didn't these avatars open a crack?
Of sorts, but mostly it was to demonstrate what was really inside the human vessel. It was not to show miracles for the sake of convincing people to follow them or to create a religion. The resurrection, for example, was not a piece of theater to underline Jesus' unique stature as the Son of God. He was not that. That was written in later. As his popularity grew, it was understood that Anu and Marduk could utilize Jesus to strengthen Anu's hold on human culture, and reposition himself as a loving God, the father of great entities like Jesus. Avatars were generally considered an annoyance by Anu. Usually they were killed or locked up to wither and die. Stories would be created to either cement them to Anu's glorification, or they would be vilified and deemed to be of Satan. There was no middle ground with avatars. Jesus was really the first avatar that Anu decided to embrace and create a world religion around. Each of the other world religions were modeled after Christianity, even those whose founder was not technically an avatar. Avatars were very rare. They wanted to come in and push down the walls, but they needed a large enough following to bring the whole wall down. A crack wouldn't be enough. And if they came simply to show the nature of the infinite being inside each human uniform, they risked a religion being built around them that would become, over time, welded to Anu and the holographic, multi-layer deception that hung over humanity like a dome. The wingmakers refer to a new type of being called the sovereign entity. These are pre-sovereign integral beings, but they are seated with the capacity to step out of the hierarchy, and in doing so, they allow themselves to examine information that others would attack or ignore. Unfortunately, the information that will liberate people is the very information they are programmed to attack.
When you use the term hierarchy, what are you referring to exactly?
The wingmakers seem to use this interchangeably with Anu at the top, his leadership within the dimensions, or bubble 2, and his leadership on Earth in the form of the triad of power. Collectively, this is the hierarchy.
Can you help me understand how it is that no one knows about this? I mean, out of 6 billion people that walk the earth now, and I don't know how many over the whole history of mankind, but it must be, I don't know, about 100 billion or so. How could it be disguised?
That's how many life expressions, perhaps, but not beings.
Because of reincarnation, right?
Yes. But to answer your question, it's done through the interface of the human vessel. The interface is what most people consider to be them. That is their consciousness. The interface fuses with the physical body and the dimensional being that powers and animates it. There's an old saying that the last thing a fish notices is water. It's an apt expression of our circumstance, too. Humans have been living in this consciousness of a human body ever since they were first created. It is all they have ever known, and because of the sophistication of the technology that underlies this entire deception, we are thrown distraction after distraction to never, ever consider the possibility that everything is a part of an illusion, everything. While it seems impossible that 100 billion lives have existed and not one has peered through the crack, it would be like going to the deep sea where the bioluminescent fish live, and explaining to them that a world exists of light and warmth. Maybe one or two would venture from the depths if they were told of this world, and they would return and report that they had experienced this strange, mysterious world. But never would they imagine that a whole world of land and air existed above that, where beings of entirely different natures walked on dry dirt and breathed air and looked at stars a billion light years away. Humans are a lot like those bioluminescent fish.
Okay, I understand the analogy, but no one?
Momentary glimpses through cracks, that's all. The avatars that manifested here have operated the closest to our true nature on this planet, but those who have gone through the birth process and have human DNA, they are locked into their interface or they are quickly removed.
Tuesday you talked at length about Lucifer and his creation of the Animus. Where's that factor into this story?
Until last night I didn't know if this interview would even take place. I knew you wanted to speak in depth about the Grand Portal, but I wasn't sure at what level I would be allowed to disclose it. This is very guarded information. It's both a break-in and a break-out. The break-in is difficult to engineer amid the misinformation and deception that occurs on this planet relative to humans. Lucifer and the fallen angels was a nod to the fallen humans who were booted out of Eden. It is the same story with the same purpose: place fear of rebellion in the consciousness systems of humans. Make it strong and potent in the unconscious mind, and make sure that Lucifer, Satan and the devil mirror the Trinity of good, the Father, Son and the Holy Ghost. Anu realized that the best way to make his human creation lean his way was to make the path to his kingdom appear virtuous and morally acceptable. And how do you do that? You have evil embodied in demons that are bent on enslaving humans and preventing them from following the virtuous path. It created the perfect polarity of human beings progressing to the kingdom of God, while demons seduced and ensnared them. Angels and ascended masters were guides to show the way to the waiting kingdom. Eastern traditions used demigods, hierarchies of masters, meditation, but it was based on the very same polarity, which at its most basic level was light is good, and darkness is evil. So with that said, let me return to your question about Lucifer and the Animus. The story of Lucifer is like a prop on a stage. With Lucifer in play, the stage is more dangerous. You can place blame. You can deflect blame and responsibility from the morally righteous and God-fearing humans. You can infer that your enemies are enslaved by demons that do the bidding of Lucifer or Satan. This creates conflicts that lead to wars. This creates histories of conflict which sow generation after generation of people who are living their forefathers' conflict. Amid all of this, God grows in stature and importance. Everyone wants to claim that God is on their side. Lucifer was a catalyst to enlarge the importance of Anu, to make humans dependent on him even though they never saw him, heard him, tasted him, smelled him or touched him. He was in the universal field, vis-a-vis the unconscious mind. It was programmed this way, and religious culture only made it feel more real. The Animus were the human 3.0, in the trajectory envisioned by Anu, to support his infinite supremacy over humanity. His goal was to synthesize humanity with technology. The Animus were us in a potential future. There are government organizations, corporate entities and research institutions that share this same goal even as we speak.
How did the decision get made not to release everything?
I've said that the Wingmakers materials are extensive. There are 24 philosophical papers, but only 4 will be released. The 4 interviews we previously done, as I told you, these 4 will be released, possibly not all at once, but those have been sanctioned. This interview and the remaining 20 philosophy papers will not be released until certain conditions are met. What those conditions are, I don't know. I assume it has to do with the discovery of the portal, the human portal I mentioned, and getting the crack in the wall established in this world. Once a foothold is made in establishing the inception point, perhaps then the other materials can be released. As for how the decision is made, let me be very clear that this is not my decision. It is determined by the Wingmakers. An intervention from time travelers is a very sensitive operation. Many variables need to be weighed and considered.
Forgive my blunt question here, but how do you know that the Wingmakers aren't part of this whole deception?
At some point you have to trust your feelings and intuition, otherwise everything is just a purposeless mental exercise. I can say that I'm 100% confident. As a scientist, I'm disbelieving by nature, but everything I've read and studied is consistent to their stated goal, which is to establish a new inception point for human beings in this specific time. Their first disclosure is a cloaked message of hope. an energetic rewiring of the spiritual philosophies of this planet, away from masters, organizations, hierarchies and belief. It is more focused on becoming a spiritual activist, or practitioner of behavioral intelligence. It is about activating pre-sovereign integrals, who are able to understand the evolutionary scope of the human being, and help it to veer in the direction of the sovereign integral. The next or second disclosure will be the activation of the human portal. I don't know yet how this will unfold, only that it will happen relatively soon. The third disclosure will be this interview, and possibly other material. When this interview is released, it signals that the inception point has already been made. According to the wingmakers, this means that the grand portal will occur on this planet. Once the new inception point is anchored, it will unfold to plan. I have made the decision that if the second disclosure occurs, I will commit to this plan 100%. Until then, I have told the wingmakers that I am with them, and will conduct my actions according to their insights and guidance, but I will always have doubt in my mind, until I see that the second disclosure occurs.
What if no one believes this, Dr. Neruda? What if you release this interview sometime in the future, and no one can relate to it or, as you suggested, they attack it? What then? Is the human portal sufficient to make this whole thing happen?
Yes. That's what I have been told. Once the inception point is anchored, it will all unfold to plan.
So no one needs to believe this, it'll just happen? That doesn't sound right.
This information will remain in the underground, but science, according to the wingmakers, will be the force to actually prove out this information.
How?
Science will find the walls. They won't expose the crack or necessarily assist in the demolition, but they will expose the walls.
But you said that LERM was discovered by the ACIO, and they thought of it as God or universal intelligence or whatever it was.
Yes. I'm not saying that science will define the hologram of deception as an insidious ruse perpetrated on humanity to enslave infinite beings to operate as finite, fear-based diminishments of themselves. That's not my point. But those sovereign entities that stand around the crack in the wall will need help from legitimate sources that validate the possibility of the hologram. I don't expect science to label the hologram good or bad, or imbue it with philosophical issues like deception, polarity, separation, etc. The wingmakers have explained that around the time that the human portal is activated, a scientist of great stature will emerge with a theory that will support the inception point. It is all being facilitated by their hacking into the program of these and other individuals.
Do you know the name of this scientist?
No.
Do you think it's you?
No. I have no stature. No one has ever heard of me. The wingmakers were speaking of someone who held a high degree of credibility in the scientific community.
I still don't see how it will happen. I mean the wall coming down. If things are as screwed up as you say, people will follow their programming. They'll have too much fear to release everything they've learned, to be real and true. I just don't think people can make such a radical shift.
I agree. They can't, not in the face of the status quo. But the status quo is part of the wall that will be taken down. You can't paper over this. You can't wave a magic wand and pretend it doesn't exist. The wars between races, religions, classes, geographies, relationships of every scope, these cannot be pardoned by a savior or ET race. They have consequences, and these have to be dealt with. The status quo, the old normalcy, the comfortable distortion, will be removed, because you cannot build a heaven on earth as simply as plopping a new reality layer on top of the status quo. It would be like adding the Grand Canyon on top of a skyscraper. The skyscraper can't support it.
The amount of change that's coming sounds overwhelming.
If there's one thing I learned in this interaction with the wingmakers, there is a programming track, and then there is a super consciousness track. The latter is involved with how quantum reality membranes intersect, and can create chain reactions that ripple across every dimension. These chain reactions are guided by event strings designed by beings from very high dimensions. As I previously said, every being has the I am, sovereignty, but they also possess the we are, integration. As the I am asserts itself through the expression of behaviors, either resistive or insertive, the I am disentangles itself from the program, the human 2.0 interface. It begins to reconnect with the we are frequency, or the tone of equality as the wingmakers have referred to it. It broadcasts this through the unconscious mind or universal field, making it easier for another being to touch into this same perspective, and adopt these behaviors. My point is that either the designers of the higher dimensional planes, or humanity as a collective, could potentially accelerate or decelerate the grand portal.
What if there was a tug of war, like the higher beings wanted it sooner, and humanity wanted it later?
I don't know. I suspect the higher dimensional beings would listen to the resistance. I really don't have an opinion on that one.
One day, hopefully in the not-too-distant future, a person will hear this interview. What advice would you give them?
Everyone has thoughts and emotions. Everyone shares a reality called Earth and the human body. We're all on the same stage, playing different roles, but the stage unifies us to some degree. None of us can look across the stage and see a beautiful world of peace and harmony, or goodwill to all men. It isn't the reality that encompasses us. The question is, how do we move closer to a reality that supports our most innate truth, that I am, we are? How do we create a stage and write a play that supports our transformation into the sovereign integral, that is in fact what we each are? Has religion shown the way? Has spirituality? How about science? How about our education system? Government? My point is that nothing that is currently in play is uniting us in equality and oneness. If you look at everything in your world, after you hear this interview, you will see that our world is designed for a very specific function, and this function is to feel separation. It can be as obvious as the color of skin, gender and different cultures, to the subtler distinctions between religions and spirituality, but the design is fractal, and it infuses everything in this world, in this common unity I have called separation. Ironically, our unity is separation. If you agree, if you also see, or sense this separation, you might also decide that it's escalating, not moving in the direction of unity, but further towards diversification and distinction, as if the more granular humanity becomes, in its information access and expression, the more it drifts apart into clumps of similarity, that feign unity within the clump, but expresses separation to the whole. The leaders of this world, whether they come from political, economic, military, religious or cultural perspectives, know how to speak the language of unity and oneness, but their actions are the result of programs that often act in reverse. This isn't about thoughts and language. This is about behaviors and actions. People know how to disconnect from their thoughts and say one thing, and then do another. They know how to feign care, but their actions demonstrate hollowness. This is not an indictment to every standing solution, but nothing has worked. Religion's failure has birthed the nihilistic and disillusioned organizations of darkness and occult experimentation. They feed off one another. It's symbiotic survival. But what is lost in this is the reality that confusion and disaffection reaches into the world's populations, and dulls our collective minds and hearts. There is hope. Hope resides in the vacuum of unity and oneness, that is unaligned to anything on this planet. No one owns it, or controls it, or administers it. There is no mediation or a go-between. It is completely unique. For all intents and purposes, it has never been seen or heard. It is on the other side of the wall. This is our hope, as foreign and strange as it may seem. What is in this world is not working, and it is because of separation. I don't care if you read the most esoteric, spiritual information on this planet, it is of separation. I've read esoteric, spiritual documents, over the past 20 years, that would make most people swoon, and say to themselves, this is the highest information, or this information is true because it is so detailed. No one could possibly know this much detail, unless it was true. The most esoteric information on this planet was not written by human beings, but through human beings, vis-a-vis channeling. The channeling speaks of wonderful spiritual realities, of how humans and aliens are one, of how the deep psychology of human beings is constructed, of the complex cosmological environment in which humanity is nested. All wonderful information except no one mentions how we are enslaved, or why, or by whom. Not one. If these wonderful sources of information knew about how humanity is enslaved, wouldn't they share it? Isn't this the most basic point of information? What the wingmakers call the inception point. Why hasn't any of this esoteric literature shown this? I'll tell you, because the beings are either inside the hologram and don't realize it themselves, or are part of a deception and are guarding its discovery from humans. They're no different from us, as infinite beings. They're lost in this hologram of deception as much as we are. For those of you who hear this interview and are unsettled by it, I can only say, good, you should be. It's a reality check on a cosmic, universal and individual level. You can bathe in the splendor of spirituality and quench your thirst with the presented masters, or you can deepen your understanding of the reality that confronts us and stand up committed to apply your self-expression in service to truth. To walk your life in the expression of resistive and insertive behaviors. To be sovereign and integral. It isn't about spouting high spiritual concepts in thoughts and words. That is the reflex of the consciousness system. It's parroting and robotic. Live the I am, we are, in your behaviors, and leave the mind. Shutter it. The mind is programmed to compare and analyze, which feeds the me-you separation. Sorry about that, I got a little carried away with my answer.
No, it was good to hear your passion for this. I guess the thing that's interesting to me is that the wingmakers' materials are esoteric, at least to me, and they seem to be explaining cosmological systems and psychological structures. How is it different than what you were just saying about the channeled information?
Sometime this year the Wingmakers site will be released on the internet, at least a part of it. Its only goal, according to its authors, is to introduce one concept, the sovereign integral. That is the fractal seed for the inception point. The second phase will introduce practical behaviors to support the sovereign being in their deprogramming of what it means to be a spiritual person. The third phase is to anchor the inception point and create the crack in the wall.
You've talked about the crack in the wall as the inception point. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
I will, but first let me state something that I want to mention before I forget. The youth of this world are impressionable. They're transitioning from the subconscious implants of their parents and forefathers to the creation of their own personality. They want to be different, they want to express themselves uniquely, and this opens them to influence. Where does this influence arise? Increasingly it comes through technology and the culture creators of music, entertainment, games and books. They bring the tools for youth to knit their unique layer of personality that can fuse atop their genetic layer of consciousness, the subconscious. The glamour models, as the wingmakers refer to them, convey a powerful elixir, which is to be selfish and self-obsessed. Narcissism is okay. Nihilism is the philosophy. This is prevalent and it will continue to spread, because this is Anu's program. When technology is unleashed, in the form of global platforms, the impressionable youth will inform their consciousness and personality layers by means of this underlying philosophical belief in nihilism. The way this seeps into the culture, through technology that helps codify personality in our youth, is one of the clearest examples of how Marduk's programming spreads. However more sophisticated the technology becomes, the more integral it is to the person, the more the culture creators will exercise this philosophical system in humanity.
Why?
Because nihilism is the belief in nothing, and if kids build their personality and belief system from these ingredients, they will be more obedient to their internal programs.
Why?
If you don't really believe in the higher reality of our world, you are more inclined to relinquish your sovereignty, or the I am consciousness. The phrase, selling my soul to the devil, is simply code for, I surrender to the will of Anu, and desire to let him take my life for his purpose. The unstated objective of that renouncing of the I am, is that Anu will give me something in return for my sacrifice. But the only thing that is returned, is slavery to the system. You walk your life according to your program, and the program ensures you are a puppet, whether you are rich or poor.
I'm glad you mentioned children. Do you see them getting this? And if so, at what age?
If you mean, will children understand the information that I've shared tonight? Yes, of course. In many ways, they'll get it better than their adult counterparts, whose human 2.0 interface is more welded or infused into the human uniform. But the wingmakers have written the material so that they will be understood by the prepared, and age is not the key factor. It is the preparation.
Like what? I mean, what constitutes preparation?
Preparation is willingness to change. It is a lack of fear to embrace a completely new paradigm, and just as much, to release the old. If a person is poorly prepared for this information, they defend what this information tears down, which is nearly everything. They are not prepared to step into the vacuum of change that this information brings into their life.
But why?
It requires a lot of responsibility to accept this information. This information is unsettling because you are on your own. We are on our own. There is no savior, or army of angels, or ETs who are going to collect the good and bring them to their heavenly home. This also requires work. It is behavioral adjustments. It is impeccability. It is authenticity. It is attentiveness. It is caring. It is not a party. It is not surface cosmetics. This is a sober journey into self-realization, no matter how that realization appears. It is a commitment to that premise. You don't say to yourself, I'll walk that path, but only if I get to go to heaven and rest in paradise with beautiful souls all around me. That's not this path. For those who want that path, they can subscribe to the religion or cult of their choice and find those kinds of promises aplenty. This information is for those interested in breaking through to their true self, and in doing so, not to rest and relax, or party and enjoy, but to serve truth through their behaviors, until everyone crosses into that reality of oneness and equality, from which we came.
You were talking about the insertive behaviors a little earlier. I wrote some of them down, but I didn't hear the word love. Did I miss it, or is it missing for a reason?
Love is not used frequently in the Wingmakers materials in general. I think in part that's because the word carries so much baggage in this world. It has a kind of sentimental, codependent energy in terms of relationships, and then in culture it's used so casually, almost like a catch-all phrase that people use to greet one another like, how are you? Love is the unification force. It is only that, and yet, in many ways, that is everything. From the Wingmaker's perspective it is a very important word concept, even though they use it sparingly. The 6 heart virtues I mentioned are considered the different ways in which love manifests in our behaviors. To this extent, love is expressed in these virtuous behaviors like gratitude, compassion, forgiveness and humility. In that context, the 6 heart virtues, collectively, are the expression of love in the human dimension.
What about joy? It also seems to be missing.
I know this information seems very sobering and unsettling. Because I defected from the ACIO, I have 2 forces that would like me to fail. This pressure has weighed on me. It had activated a degree of paranoia within me that I didn't know was possible. For this reason, joy, at least as it pertains to me, has not yet been a part of my personal experience. I'm sure everyone will receive these materials differently, especially the information in this interview. I would remind you that the emotional and feeling world is a functional implant, and the emotions we attribute to our heart or soul are not truly coming from those sources.
Then, where do they come from?
The layer of the mind known as the unconscious generates emotions, but they are felt throughout the human body. The unconscious layer of the mind is interdimensional, so it extends from bubble 1 to bubble 2, which allows you to feel in the astral world or afterlife. When I express any of the heart virtues, I place them through the lens of oneness and equality. That's where they achieve their potency and expression. Then I take that experience, and quite literally send it to my head region, imagining that experience is placed in the pineal gland, in the center of the brain. This is my way of mailing it to everyone, through the unconscious mind.
Why do you call them heart virtues if emotions are generated by the unconscious?
The heart is a metaphor for the portal within each individual. It is relatively free of the human 2.0 interface and mind functional implants, partly because of the electromagnetic field it produces, and partly because of its physical dynamics. The Wingmakers suggest that the heart virtue should be experienced and expressed first in this region of the body, instead of the mind or head region, as a way to isolate the tendency of the mind to simulate these emotions from the unconscious mind layer, where they, by definition, lack the same potency of expression, because they exist in separation.
It sounds kind of complicated.
I prefer to look at the flip side. If I do nothing, if I go sit quietly, in my chair and meditate, or study religious scripture, or pray, how am I supporting the progress of this reality? If this world remains ensnared in deception, that's complicated, not just for me, but every being in bubbles 1 and 2.
One of the things you've mentioned frequently is this notion of oneness and equality. I understand the meaning and import of the words, but these are certainly not new concepts. Doesn't every spiritual teacher say this?
Not all, but some do. You can go back 2,500 years to Heraclitus, who announced that all things are one. It is an important concept of human philosophy, and to some extent modern-day physics. With regard to religions, often the founder says one thing, and the followers, who organize and interpret the founder's words and teachings, alter it, but oneness and unity have not been mainstays of religion, particularly in the context of behaviors. The wingmakers are focused on behavioral intelligence, expressed through the lens of oneness and equality. The I am, we are, is rooted in this principle. It may not seem like a big deal to adopt this simple philosophical perspective, and frankly, it isn't, because they're simply words and it's only a concept, but if it's genuinely adopted and anchored in the core of your belief system, then you can possess the necessary commitment to express this in your behaviors. And this is where most people will probably have a problem. The Human 2.0 interface is full of programming from Marduk and the human unconscious. It is way down in this quagmire like a person caught in quicksand, struggling to find a rope or anything solid to pull themselves out. The rope in this case is the simple framework of I am, we are, and applying it through our behaviors, but it has to line up. If you adopt the framework, but your behaviors do not reflect this, the rope disappears. The unification of all beings in all dimensions exists. It's only when you step out of quantum space-time that you realize the illusion of separation, and retaining this basic truth of oneness and equality in a human 2.0 spacesuit is no simple task. That's why it must be more than words, and the words must be practiced in the now.
Why are the wingmakers doing it this way? It seems so innocent. I mean, asking people to become self-aware, and practice assertive and resistive behaviors. After hearing all of what's happening in the triad of power, it seems like we're using slingshots against their stealth bombers. They want a money system that makes us perpetually indebted, slaves to the dollar, and they want this money system to be one currency. The most powerful people on the planet with access to the best technology, the best weapons, how can we expect to prevail if they want transhumanism?
To understand why the wingmakers are focused on the sovereign integral process, you first need to understand why the triad of power is focused on their plan. The triad of power believes their one-world concept is the right concept. They want to unify humanity through a money system that they control, utilizing technology as another means to unify. Unity, in their minds, is more like shepherding the human herd into easy-to-manage corrals and monitoring them for any rebellion. Their form of unity is a chimera. It is theater for display purposes, and nothing more. Their form of, we're all in this together, let us protect you, is simply more illusion and deception. Their plan for Human 3.0 remains fused to the same functional implants that constitute Human 2.0, and that is separation. As I said earlier, they are here to prepare for Anu's return, whether they are conscious of it or not. All aspects of the power system, including major religions, are here to prepare. That is their watchword, prepare. The Anunnaki have one dominant belief in humanity: we are weak, because we live in fear and separation. We do not stand up to the drip of indoctrination, or the slow, but persistent evaporation of our personal liberties. Now, remember that the Anunnaki and their triad of power are both calculating and patient. What they established in our distant past is beginning to come to fruition. The finite, 70-year life of a human being lacks patience. It is programmed to be impatient. This is against infinite beings that see timelines in hundreds of thousands of years and can program individual human beings within those timelines to achieve precisely what they want, if human beings agree to it, if they don't stand up. The Anunnaki do not embrace the sovereign integral process. The notion of oneness and equality seems like a weakness to them. They believe they have the upper hand in this chess match. They foresee checkmate. Humans will fold. The sacrifice of Princess Diana last August was symbolic of the vibrant queen being lost on the chessboard. Those are the kind of messages they make, the kind of bold announcements. They do this out of a feeling of certainty in their programming, and patience. When I say programming, I don't mean just the internal interface that Marduk has programmed, but also the programming of the unconscious mind through the media, culture, religion, politics and economic structure. The combination of these forces is really the cause of their confidence, because they see our fall as an inevitability. Now, to answer your question, human beings, even those with Anunnaki DNA, can become self-realized of their true nature through a simple process. It doesn't require that they meditate and pray all day, or retreat to an ashram. The sovereign integral process becomes a natural part of the life expression of the individual. If enough human beings can embrace this process, or something like it, the crack in the wall will expand, the wall will become less stable, and the world of separation, in its brittleness, will begin to crumble. The life essence is what we have on our side. This is not a slingshot as you put it. It is the infinite force that powers every object in the universe. Life is inside us, and it exists in one and only one state: equality and oneness. The entire hologram of deception, as created and curated by the Anunnaki and their cohorts, that is not life, it is the exemplar of separation. Life is truthful and authentic. Separation begets deception, unworthiness and fear. If enough human beings awaken, if we begin to realize what's afoot, what plans are being made to further enslave us, and ensure that we remain a part of the hologram of deception, life will move inside us and we can collectively stand up and stop this. But it has to be done in the right way, with honesty, forgiveness and compassion. The alternative to separation must be expressed in our movements and practices. We have to model these behaviors as a collective entity. That is the definition of the grand portal.
You've talked a lot about separation. Can you elaborate on why this concept is so prevalent?
If you look at the material that comes from religion, spirituality, philosophy, psychology, even the arts, you will see that much of this material is designed to be an owner's manual for our functional implants. They support the Human 2.0 interface. They instruct us on the methods and attitudes to activate these systems inside us. I've previously mentioned the 3 layers of the consciousness interface: the